The content you're about to enjoy comes from the archives of The Best You. We're devoted to the very best in personal development. With a magazine and resources dedicated to inspiring and changing people's lives, at The Best You, we work with the world's leading writers and trainers on the evolution of the self, and people whose journeys have been affected by their work and words. For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co. Hi, I'm Bernardo Moya, and welcome to Inspiring People. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Chris Cardell, who is an authority in entrepreneurial success. Hi Chris, how are you?
I'm good.
Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and where you're from and your early years, please.
I'm from London. I'm from South London, Bromley in Kent, home of David Bowie, I would add. My early years, they were quite normal, I guess, in terms of I went to school. I didn't like school too much. When I was about 6 years old, I remember looking in a window of a shop with my mum. It was a music shop and they had like guitars and drums and that type of thing. And there was a microphone in there. I remember obsessing about this microphone, and it was £35, which was a lot of money then. And I started saving up for the microphone, and I got to about £28, and then somebody told me I also would need an amplifier. So that was my first sort of dreams being shattered. But something kind of got me into the idea of communicating and communications and that type of thing. I was actually very shy as a child. All sorts of fascinating things were going on, including when I was about 4, I fell over and knocked my baby teeth out, my front teeth. And when you've got no front teeth, nobody can understand a single thing that you're saying. So I got sent to elocution lessons, and the lady who did the elocution, there's still a letter my mum has, and it says, and the quote is, Christopher will have a lifetime of problems communicating. So somehow this all ended up with me being fascinated about communications, go figure. And so I went to school, wasn't that keen on school, but when I was about 12, 13, I started obsessing about radio. And I just decided I wanted to work in radio.
Was there any subjects in particular that you stood out, or was it just in school?
In school... No, it was pretty even, actually. It was. I did very well. I remember when I was 8, I came first in class, and it went downhill from there on. So I think my primary school wasn't too bad. Secondary school, I did okay. It was a reasonably good school. I did my O-levels. I did some A-levels. I did okay, but it just bored me. Most of it just bored me. It didn't seem particularly interesting or relevant, and I probably was a bit rebellious. I just didn't buy into this authority idea. There's a great quote by John Lennon where he just talks about his frustration at school, and he says because he realised at an early age he was smarter than all the teachers. I'm not sure I'd go that far, but it just didn't inspire me. My inspirations were kind of outside of school, so my main aim at school was to leave.
Was there anybody in particular that inspired you then? Or
my big inspiration as a teenager was Paul Weller,
okay.
Singer with the Jam at the time, who I was quite a shy, introverted child and teenager, and he just wrote these lyrics about belief and about belief in yourself and about not buying into authority and all that. And I just really resonated with those. It had a big, huge. So actually, he was a very big influence on me. He was the first person really who came along in my life and said, you can do what you want, you can go and be what you want, and all the people around you are telling you what's not possible, forget about it. That kind of thing. So that was very, very, I love music, and that was a big inspiration for me. And then when I got into radio, various radio people were inspiring to me. But I got a lot from music growing up.
How did you get into radio? We
had the radio station in London at the time was Capital Radio, which we still have, but it was the only one really at the time. So we all listened to this radio station. And they used to have this a little feature on a Sunday afternoon called The Young DJ. And you could go in and record and be a DJ for 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I was 13 and I applied to do this, and I got in and I got invited in. And I remember walking into the studio and deciding that this was what I was going to do. And it was really weird because it wasn't even a decision. I just knew. And I remember walking down the big spiral staircase saying to the person I was with, I'm going to come and work here one day. Now, at the time, when they used to advertise for a job, they would have about 50,000 applications. So lots of people very quickly started telling me how that was an impossible dream, but I kind of set my goal to do that. And I got involved in a local little small cable radio station in southeast London in Greenwich, and I did my A-levels. Everybody at school gave me a very hard time. They used to say, you've got to go to university because how are you going to work for the BBC if you don't go to university? I say, I'm not going to work for the BBC. I'm going to work for this radio station. So I did my A-levels, but I chose not to go to university. I didn't have time. I felt I didn't have time. Went and worked at a radio station up in Birmingham, BRMB. And then when I was 21, 22, I got my job at Capital Radio. And I was a producer and a reporter, and I ended up working with Chris Tarrant on his breakfast show. I did the news with Chris for 3 years. I was his newsreader on the breakfast show. So dreams can come true.
And you started very, very young in life. With a very clear goal.
Yeah, I was young, and it was very clear, and I was very focused. And I guess it gave me an early reference experience of what we read in the books and what the experts about. If you really set your mind on something and you really want to achieve it, you can do it. And in a way, it was easier to achieve than I thought. It took time and it took huge amounts of effort and work. But looking back, I was always going to do it. It was always going to happen. And what I didn't know at the time, and now looking back, is actually at the time you think, oh, everybody's like this. There must be thousands of people who are as committed as I am, and they're not. Pick anything in life. The number of people who really will commit to mastering anything is very small as a percentage of the population. So I think there's great opportunity for anyone in any field to do that.
Thank you. And also I've always come across with these interviews that a lot of the times there seems to be a turning point, or there seems to be an internal or external drive in order to achieve that. What was it for you, if any?
Good question. I don't recall a turning point. I think I just had a drive. I lived in the first few years of my life with my mum and my grandparents, and my grandfather, who was part Italian, was a very sort of strong, powerful figure, and he was a big influence as well, I think, early on. And I think either through luck or something or other, something got installed in my head about being different. I was different and I felt different, and somewhere at an unconscious level, I guess, was just the idea of doing what everybody else did just always bored me, whether it be school or university or whatever it is. I'm a big fan of that thing. If you see everybody doing something, do anything else. And now as an adult, I consciously think that, but I think when I was younger, something was driving me.
You were very successful, run your own show on the radio, and so what happened then? What happened that made you want to move on?
I got to 25, 26 years old. I'd been doing the morning show with Chris for 3 or 4 years, and you have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do that. And I'm not really an early morning person. And it takes over your life. So you start obsessing about sleep and that kind of thing. And it was great. I'm not complaining because we had a fabulous time. But I really got to the point where the options were to go into management there, which just also didn't appeal to me, or do something else. And so I decided to become entrepreneurial. And what actually happened was we did a big documentary about Michael Jackson. He was coming to London for one of his big tours. This is back when people loved Michael Jackson, before all the hassles and stuff. And we went to the States and we did a big radio documentary, and we followed his life through, and we interviewed his family and his school teacher and all that kind of thing. And we turned it into a big radio documentary. And I published my own book based on that. And I got it published myself and distributed myself and printed 20,000 of them, and we sold them out. And so that was my first little entrepreneurial venture. Then I launched a radio sponsorship company, which did great some months and terribly some other months. And we never sort of went bust or anything, but it was pretty tough at times. And I had that dawning moment, which I think every entrepreneur has at some point, where you look in the mirror and you say something to yourself along the lines of, you know what you're doing. We were very good at what we did. We were creatively brilliant at what we did. But you have that moment where actually you know nothing about the marketing and the advertising and how to get customers and how to get clients, which really I didn't. And so I started learning about that, and I went to the States and I learned from people there and I learned from people here. And I hopefully got very good at it, thinking it was for me and my own business. But what happened was some of our clients started asking them for marketing help. And so I sort of accidentally became, this was all a big accident, I became a marketing expert. And then when the internet came along, an internet marketing expert. And it really evolved from there. I did consulting at first, but when the internet took off, it allowed us to reach large numbers of people at the same time. So now I have a couple of businesses, but my main business shows entrepreneurs how to do their internet marketing. But for me, it's still more like a media company. So we do big, like you guys, we do big seminars or big teleseminars or webinars or global video broadcasts with a few thousand people on. And so I've kind of, the loop has gone full circle, because to me that feels like media again.
If you're interested in finding your true purpose, if you're interested in finding your legacy, if you're interested in growing, if you are sick and tired of reading books that don't help you, haven't helped you, or are not helping you, or attending courses and seminars that haven't really had an impact in your life, I invite you to read my book, The Question, Find Your True Purpose, out now. For more information, go to www.thequestion.co. If you're interested in working with me, contributing, speaking at any of our many events, partnering, or licensing The Best You, for more information, go to www.thebestyou.co.
So I suppose when you decided to move into what you're doing now, how important was education and learning to understand and obviously improve your skills? How important was that? Or was that
to me, that was everything. I mean, I had a simple kind of belief system in life, which I then heard articulated later on by like people in the field of NLP and things about modeling. But back then, I just thought of this in a very simple way, which was, if somebody in the world had achieved something that you wanted to achieve, let's go out and find out how they do it and copy and model them. So, and I'm sort of obsessive compulsive, and my media experience, when you're in the media, especially if you're on the sort of journalism side, you discover it's much easier to get access to people than you think. If you ask nicely and ask the right questions, you can get access to pretty much anybody. So I went and found the very best marketing people, not just in my country, but on this planet. And I sat down with them and I drilled into their brains and I found out how they did it. So education was huge. I had a just zipping back to the radio, but I think it's relevant. So I said that I went and worked for the big radio station when I was about 21. And the vacancy for the big job, which is to do the news on the morning show, because the morning show is the big show on any radio station. It's got the most listeners. This vacancy came up and they auditioned me for it. And I went in the studio and I did it all. I read it all. And my boss called me in a day or two later and he said, listen to your audition. He said there was nothing wrong with it. He said, you're good. You read the news well. You know what you're doing. We have complete trust and faith in you. He said, but you sound too young. He said, you're 22. Now, at the time, like the royal family listened to this show and Downing Street listened. He said, we've got to have authority. And I think the first Gulf War was about to start. And so whoever did the news on their big show had to, he said, so I'm sorry, I can't do it. And I was devastated for probably about a week. And then I thought, right, if I don't sound old enough, let me find out how to sound old enough. So I went and I found a retired BBC newsreader who lived in a house in the middle of nowhere in Devon. And he was a lovely gentleman. His wife invited me to stay for the weekend. And we spent the whole weekend. He taught me how to sound more authoritative by reading scripts. I went and found a voice tutor lady who taught me about, if you speak up here, you sound higher, and you speak down there, you sound lower. And so I lowered my voice and I got more authority and I worked on the vowels and all this type of thing. And to cut a long story short, a year later, I got the job. So again, that was a very powerful experience. Okay, if you want something, go find out how to do it. And that's what I did with the marketing. I went and found out how to do it. And I discovered, everybody talks about running a business as being this incredibly difficult thing to do, which it kind of is because of all the challenges that we have. But the fundamentals of what's required for success are not difficult and are not complicated. And I discovered it's like everything else in life, There's 3 million businesses in Britain. About 95% of them are either doing okay or struggling or doing reasonably well. 3 or 4% are doing very well. And then there's about 1% of them who are just doing extraordinary. They increase their profits every year by 50, 100, 200%. It turns out if you go and find them and find out what they're doing things radically different to everybody else. And so if you copy them and model them and create a model and then apply it and translate it to everybody's business, you've got a model, you've got a recipe for running a very successful business. So, long answer to your question, but your question about education is, I fell in love again with learning. I remember when I left school, I was 18, and the school had these great big thick wooden doors, really heavy. And I remember shutting the door behind me and thinking, this is great. I'll never have to learn anything ever again in my life. Because I'd had this sort of dislike of learning installed in me because it was so boring, all the stuff we were learning. And I'd rediscovered that passion a few years later. And now, like you, I just, to me, I associate massive pleasure with learning because it helps you create change, do things differently, make money, whatever it may be. So, yeah.
Well, that's a fantastic answer. Thank you, Chris. And that's kind of the idea. The idea is obviously if you want to learn, if you want to do something differently, you're going to have to model or learn from the people that are very experienced or know how to do it. But you obviously adapted and did whatever was required in order to become who you are today. What's with a lot of the stuff that you do now and the advice that you give people, and I appreciate you may have replied some of this already, but so what's the advice you give to somebody that wants to get into business, somebody who's thinking of becoming a businessman or woman and is thinking of starting from scratch or just taking their company to the next level? What kind of advice do you provide?
Well, if they're starting from scratch, I think the advice is fairly different to someone who's thinking about it to someone who's already doing it. And the question about the people who are thinking of doing it is really important because there are a couple of decisions that people make at the beginning and they don't even realize, I think sometimes they're making those decisions. And those decisions will influence literally the rest of their entrepreneurial lives. And everybody asks the question, what should I sell? Like, that's the obvious question. Okay, I'm sick of working for these people. I'm going to start my own business. What should I sell? And it's the wrong first question. The right first question is, who am I going to sell to? Because I may have a passion for, doing knitting like, pink dolls or something. But the problem with focusing on that and, okay, my business is going to be the production of these things is it ignores the buyer and the potential buyer. And to jump to the people with the existing business, the challenge that most business owners face these days is marketing, is selling, is getting through to the right person and being able to sell to the right person. So if you're thinking of starting a business, you want to pick something with ideally a higher end or more affluent buyer, someone who is willing to invest and for whom your business, you're not having to battle it out with everybody else to compete on price. Because if you're having to compete on selling the lowest price thing, you've got a huge, huge problem. You ideally want a business that's repeat business. Like a hairdresser is repeat business. You come back again and again, you buy the stuff of shampoo again and again, and you refer people again and again. You want to avoid a business that's kind of a one-off sale. So those factors are a wealthier, high-end buyer, repeat business. I'd start with that. Where can I find those people? And then you insert what it is that you're going to sell. For people with the existing business, the number one thing is, and I'm not saying this because it's what I do, is you've got to get really, really good at marketing and online marketing. Because your business is, sometimes at a seminar, we'll say to people, like, tell me what business you're in. And somebody will say, well, I'm a wedding photographer, or I'm a coach or a consultant, or I manufacture screwdrivers or whatever. And I say, well, obviously you're kind of all right, you're all correct because that's what you do, but actually you're all wrong because the business you're actually in is the marketing business. The business you're in, the thing that's going to make the difference between you achieving financial freedom or not is your ability to get customers. And there's an art and a science to that. And if you master it, you're basically financially free. And if you don't master it, you struggle. And so those are the kind of the core. Now, obviously, we go into a lot of detail, but those are the core messages that we convey.
But marketing has evolved and continues to evolve. That's the other thing. The other thing is that you permanently need to be reinventing and training and learning what's new.
Yeah, when I started doing this, the internet sort of existed, but we weren't really using it. So we would teach people in terms of growing their business, well, here's how you create a brochure. Here's how you put an ad in the paper, and here's how you do direct mail. And we teach the same thing it just didn't change, and it never changed. Well, we're doing, I've just done a new course about Facebook, and what we were telling people last month is now out of date. It is changing literally by the week. Facebook and Google to an extent, something shifts almost every single day. So yeah, if you're not on top of that, you're either losing out because you're just not implementing the latest leading edge thing, or your competitors are just like, having you for lunch because they're ahead of the game. So it is a very different environment. Marketing is now an evolving, shifting, changing thing, whereas it wasn't. It was a little bit like going to university and doing your degree. You learn this stuff and then you use it forever. Well, it's not like that anymore. It's changing very, very fast.
And from what you were saying, obviously, who you're going to sell to is very important, but I suppose passion or being passionate about what it is that you want to sell or the business you want to be involved in is an important drive, the same as it was for you.
Yeah, you've got to be passionate is one word. You have got to have drive. You've got to have all these things. You hear the millionaire entrepreneurs talk about. They're right, and the reason they're right is because it is tough at times. And the people, the 2/3 of businesses who end up failing, it's partly because the business owner doesn't have the resilience to deal with the tough times. So you've got to be clear about that, and you've got to know that, and you've got to be passionate about what you do. The only kind of perceived wisdom that I question on this is this thing about you've got to be absolutely passionate about the thing that you sell, because my concern about that is that there's a bit of a myth built up, which is if you can't come up with something that you just are so excited about producing and creating, then you're not really a proper entrepreneur, or you're not passionate enough. And the fact is, some people just want the freedom of being an entrepreneur, and there isn't anything obvious to sell to them. And it's a little bit of a misnomer. I think it's a slightly dangerous misnomer. My colleague Dan Kennedy, who's a great marketing expert from the United States, he says his passion is sitting in a hammock watching the ball game, having a beer, but he's not yet found anybody willing to come and pay to watch him do that. So you do have to be a little bit also kind of savvy about this. I mean, I have other interests and other business areas I'm going into and want to go into that are not necessarily as profitable as what I'm doing now, and I've put some of those on hold to focus on our main core business. So if if your passion is something slightly left of field and on the edges, and there's not clear evidence that people want your thing, just be careful. Is my only sort of if your passion is walking backwards down mountains in Tibet, you may want to set up a completely different business, make tons of money so that you can spend half the year walking rather than trying to set up the Tibetan mountain walking business,
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you.
If you're interested in watching the video content of this interview and many others, or interested in learning from world leaders and teachers, go to www.thebestyou.online. So, again, nowadays, either somebody who's lost their job or looking at reinventing themselves as kind of the update of our own software, or somebody who's just basically preparing themselves to go into life. What kind of are the best and most essential assets that people should have nowadays?
Well, I think the first thing to say is just having talked about some of the, there are challenges to the entrepreneurial life. The flip side of that is just, this is an extraordinary time that we live in, extraordinary opportunities, and a hungry crowd, a hungry audience out there for great products, great services, and great marketing. So I think the assets the person needs to have, the things we spoke about, the commitment, the determination, the ability to focus, and looping back to our earlier part of our conversation, the ability and willingness to master stuff. My biggest frustration with the business owners, and we have some incredible people doing incredibly well, but one of my frustrations with some business owners is they dabble in things, and you can't do brilliantly well dabbling in stuff. And this, they'll come along, they'll do the odd seminar, and they'll dip their toe in a little bit of selling skills, and they'll dip their toe in a little bit of Google, but they don't master things. When Google AdWords launched over 10 years ago, the ability to advertise on Google, I remember it was a Friday. I locked myself in. I was working from home. I had a little room at home at the time. I kind of locked myself in my room on a Friday afternoon, and I basically came out on the Monday afternoon. My wife would say, I think I came out to watch The Sopranos on Saturday night. But that was it, because to me it was right, we master this now. And it concerns me how few people are willing to master the core elements of their craft, of their art. Because the entrepreneurial life, it is an art, you know. There's the art of creating whatever it is. There's the art of selling it. There's the art of looking after your customers, etc., etc., etc. It's not a huge number of things, but those few core things, you'd better be willing to really obsess about getting very, very good at them, because the rewards, if you do, are immense. Because most of your competitors are not. Most of your competitors are doing the dabbling. So I think it's that willingness to learn. It's the passion, determination, and then as the business grows, other skills come in. The obvious one is the willingness to let go, you know, and outsource and not do the whole thing yourself, and that's tough, you know. So at different stages of the entrepreneurial game, I think we face different challenges. And then I think for me, the other thing is kind of the inner game. So for me, definitely in my life, but I believe for everybody, how you think, how you run your mind, the belief systems you have or choose to have, all of that, as the years gone by, I've actually become increasingly convinced is as important, if not more important, than the marketing, the online marketing, the rest of it. Because I can show you how to do all the marketing stuff pretty quickly. I can have 500 people in a room, show them all the absolute proven ways to make money from Google AdWords. And out of those 500 people, some will do brilliantly well, some will do okay, and a few will never bother and never get around to doing anything. Now, what's the difference that makes the difference? It's not the information and the knowledge, because it's the same. It's what's going on inside their heads. And so I think the entrepreneurial life is challenging enough that we have to sort of clear our own heads out and get on top of our own stuff, you know, and get out of our own way. And to me, that's as important as anything else, which is why at the same time I've followed the business and the marketing, I have an equal fascination with all the various sciences and forms of knowledge about that, because to me that's just vital, absolutely vital.
Thank you. So who inspires you now? I mean, what inspires you? What is it you're looking at doing in the future?
In terms of the entrepreneurial work, well, I'm probably most inspired by some of our own like customers and members, people we've seen over the years, gone from like nothing to you know, in some cases multi-million pound businesses. So I think they actually now inspire me more than the sort of the people you see on TV, many of whom I've met who don't particularly inspire me actually, and they're it's these real people with real lives. We have one guy who he'd never heard of me. He got a marketing piece through the post, and that's how he got introduced to me. And we did a seminar a year or two ago, and he wrote me this letter, and he said, "I'm really sorry. I've been to every one of your events, but I can't be at the event tomorrow. The reason I can't be is my wife is having a baby, and I just wanted to let you know that you're responsible." I thought, okay. And the story was basically that he'd been running this business, he'd been struggling, and they wanted to have another kid, but they didn't feel they could because of financial reasons. And actually getting good at all this really turned things around for him. So they inspire me as entrepreneurs in the bigger, wider world. I know you're very involved in the world of NLP. Richard Bandler and John Grinder and what they created with NLP made a huge impact on my life. Drives a lot of what I do, drives a lot of the work I do with people. I'm a massive proponent of the 80-20 principle and 80-20 thinking, the work of people like Richard Koch. There was a period in my life where I was really struggling financially, and I did some freelance work up in London, and I used to get on the train every day doing this work I didn't want to do, but I had the 80-20 book, and I read all this, and I thought, one day I'm going to implement this. So I'm a big believer in this idea that actually, 80% of your results in life come from just 20% of your effort. And so I'm constantly honing in on what are those core activities. So I think there's some of the people that and forms of thinking, if you will, that influence me now. With
technology changing and evolving so quickly, especially in marketing and social media and so on, the current 2015, kind of, what are your best tips and advice for people into making money with social media and internet marketing?
The number one thing is you've got to. There's a lot of bombarding advice coming at us about what we should and shouldn't be doing. And there's huge numbers of options now. You've got Google, you've got Facebook, you've got Pinterest, you've got blogs, you've got Twitter and all the rest of it. And people are confused and they're daunted and they don't know where to start. And the number one thing is you've got to only focus on anything that gives you a proven return on investment. So one of the principles of effective marketing for a small, medium-sized business is what we call direct response marketing, which means if I go, in the old days, if I spent £100 on a ad in a newspaper, I wanted to get at least £100 back from that ad. And somewhere in the mix, that has disappeared in all this talk about social media and all the rest of it. So when people come to me and say, you should be doing more on Twitter, I'm like, okay, you show me if I spend A, any money, or B, time and effort, which is the same as money, on doing this in Twitter, you show me the return I'm going to get on the investment. And if they can't show you that return, move on to something else, because there's plenty that you can. Google AdWords, if you put £100 or dollars into it, you can see within 24 hours where that money is coming back. So on Google, for example, I won't do anything on Google AdWords unless I get a 400% return on investment. And you have to be tough about this as the entrepreneur. And you've got all these people around you, these web designers and that, lovely people, but they are pressuring you to do things that aren't always in your best interest. So my first thing is don't get caught up by the technology. Stick to those fundamental marketing principles. In terms of where we're going, there's no doubt that the big shift and change where we're going is mobile. And when mobile phones started to be used more, people would come up to me at seminars and say, you should talk more about mobile. And I said, well, actually, I'm not going to talk more about mobile because, 6% of the population is using mobile, but we've got enough other things to do to focus on first. I think we've now reached critical mass. A lot of sources of online traffic are now at 50% mobile use. And the process that is involved for a mobile user is in many ways fundamentally different. So you've got to be on top of that. And you've got to be up to speed on that. And although people are daunted by it, the really good news is, I think there's there's going to be like a 2 to 4 year gold rush with mobile because everyone's daunted by it, everybody backs off it. And so you can advertise, for example, you can reach people on Facebook on mobile phones for next to nothing. It's unbelievably cheap. And so if you're willing to just get good at it and learn a few of the strategies, there are significant profits to be made. But don't be overwhelmed. Just use common sense,
Perfect. That's great advice. Thank you, Chris. Many, many, many years from now, what would you like your legacy to be?
That's a very good question. It's not something I spend huge amounts of time really thinking about. I find it fascinating that people who do really spend huge amounts of time concerned about their legacy because they won't be here when it's going on. So anyway, I would like to have made a difference. I would like to have used the communication skills I have to have reached hopefully a large number of people in different parts of this world and made a difference to them. The biggest buzz I get out of what I do isn't at the level of business or even finances. Yes, we're helping people grow their business or we're helping them make more money, but it's what that does for people, like the guy who couldn't have more children and decided to do so. Because to me, what this is all about boils down to one thing. It's about freedom. Anybody who starts a business, now they can do it for different reasons. Maybe they don't want to work for the boss from hell. Maybe they want to be financially free, but they're doing it for freedom at some level. So to me, this is all about freedom. And if I can contribute to people having freer lives where they are free to do what they want and be who they are and have the financial wherewithal to give the people they care about better lives, that would do it for me as a legacy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you very much for watching Inspiring People. Thank you.
For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co.